Alright, hi everybody, my name is Lucy. I am the Adult Services Librarian for the Harlan Community Library. The Harlan Community Library is pleased to introduce John Liepa from Des Moines with his program on how Iowa met baseball. This program has been funded by Humanities Iowa, a private nonprofit, and the State Historical Society, INC. A cultural resource for Iowans since 1971, Humanities Iowa brings humanities programs into the heart of Iowa communities. The humanities are fields of study that help us discover and remember who we are and how we came to be, as individuals and as part of the world. Humanity Iowa offers funding for the Speakers Bureau event and for grants in support of public programs to nonprofit organizations in the state of Iowa. If you have not already, please sign the sign-in form following the event. It's over there on the counter. On that same form, you can opt in to receive monthly emails about Humanities Iowa events all over the state, as well as its annual print magazine. I would encourage you to sign up for both communications. They are great ways to stay informed about the humanities events like this one all across. Humanities Iowa assures me that they respect your privacy and will not sell or share any contact information you may choose to provide. Please join me in welcoming John Liepa.
Thank you all for coming. And just as a few other points of introduction, I mentioned that I taught college students for 40 years. I taught at Iowa State. Got a couple degrees there, spent 9 years there, wonderful years, and I was talking to a couple of people there earlier on, and I made some good friends. The Burchett brothers from this place, I played rugby, and they were two props for us. I think one of them was a little bit older than I was, and one was about Rick and Al, I think they were, and then Steve Morris, I knew Steve, the newspaper, and that, so I've got over the years some connections to Harlan and so on, and I know of your sports history too. I've been a sports fan all my life and so on. So I retired full-time teaching in 2010, and part of the reason I did that is so I could do more of this. And I do these programs all over the state of Iowa. I've done them in small towns, Tabor, Iowa, Corwith, Iowa, less than 200 people. I've done them in a lot of retirement homes, mostly libraries. And I don't do just the baseball program. I also do a program on Iowa's role in the Civil War. I taught history courses and political science courses to college students, so I have an interest in all different facets of history and so on. And then I teach a course called Iowa's Ethnic Heritage, and enjoy that too. It's a very interactive course where a lot of people get to find out more about themselves in the course and so on, about where they came from, where their ancestors came from. So, but anyway, when I retired, I started doing programs as a freelancer, and then I do them through Humanities Iowa, as Lucy said, and I also do them. There's a program nationwide called OLLI, which is an acronym for the Bossier Lifelong Learning Institute. It's basically adult education, and I've been teaching courses at both Iowa State and at Drake for OLLI. And so some I get paid, some I don't. I don't care, as long as they cover my expenses. And then I do it mostly for fun. And I think this is my 219th program since I retired. And so anyway, it's good to be here. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a little bit of history predating Iowa, and talk about the myths surrounding the origins of the game, and then we'll look at basically how it found its way to Iowa. The first mention of baseball, a club, a team, a game, is on May 28th of 1858 in Davenport, Iowa. And there's not much baseball being played through the Civil War, understandably, but then it just catches on like crazy shortly after the Civil War. And we'll talk about the spread of baseball in Iowa, and we'll talk about some of the first players. And for those of you that came in a little bit late, I've been a collector of baseball cards and memorabilia for most of my life. Started out, I grew up with three brothers who all had paper routes in Des Moines, and a lot of the profits went into baseball, football, basketball cards. I put all the Dodgers in my Stokes, and but the Yankees all survived. And I hear the story all the time that my mom threw out all my baseball cards. It's always mom, it's never dad. My mom didn't, and so I've been collecting. And the way I've collected over the years has changed. I used to build sets, and I had completed sets from 1948 through about 1980 with my now adult children. I've got 5 grandkids, 4 granddaughters, and so on. But then in teaching Iowa history all those years, I started taking an interest in early Iowa baseball history. And 227 native-born Iowans have made it to the major leagues. If you throw one pitch, have one at bat, you're a major league player. There are 7 in the Hall of Fame, and we'll visit some of them in the PowerPoint. And a large part of my collection includes cards of these Iowa players. This entire case is filled with cards from Fred Clark. Most people know Bob Feller. A lot of them have never heard of Fred Clark, and you can make a real good argument that he contributed a lot more to the game of baseball than Bob Feller. And that's not being a critic of Bob Feller, but what he did, first World Series, beat Ty Cobb in a World Series, 23-year career, player manager, batted .400, it goes on and on and on. Most Iowans have never heard of him. You're going to hear some other names that you've never heard of too that played an important role. And I'd like to start out with interspersed in the PowerPoint are some quotes. And I'd like to start out by, when you think of the 3 major sports, basketball, football, and baseball, I don't think the other 2 have anyone comparable to some of these characters, like Leo Durocher, Yogi Berra, Satchel Paige, what comes out of their mouth. And so you'll see interspersed periodically some of these quotes in here. And I start out with this one. Leo's in the Hall of Fame, and he's a great manager. But one of the things that, this isn't what put him in the Hall of Fame. He got kicked out of more games as a manager than all but 2 other managers in the history of the game. He kicked up a lot of dirt, he swore a lot, he was sent off the field a lot. His nickname was the Lip, and he worked hard to keep that nickname. So we'll start with that. All right, so first we'll talk about the origins of the game. And there's a 3-part myth that we'll get to in a minute. Then the early history, coming to Iowa, and then the players. This is a lithograph, Currier and Ives, that make the greeting cards and so on. The date is 1866. You're going to hear this name a number of times. The place is Hoboken, New Jersey, right across the river from New York City. It plays an incredibly important role in the history of the evolution of the game of baseball. And I use this to introduce you to 3 of the myths surrounding the game. Myth number 1, that it's a uniquely American national game. It's not, okay? And we'll explore if it's not, then where did it come from? It evolves, and we add our touches to it, and we make it our national game until relatively recently. Now the NFL and others draw more people than baseball does. But, so that's part 1 of the myth, that it's uniquely American. Second part is, if you look at the scene, you would think it's some kind of a rural, small-town scene where this is taking place. And a lot of people would like to think that Bob Feller playing catch with his dad by the barn is where baseball was born. No. If you're going to put a plaque anywhere to pay tribute to something that looks like the modern-day game of baseball, where those rules came from, you would put it in downtown New York City, in Brooklyn, okay? And then we'll talk about that. But the third part of the myth is the worst. This gentleman's been to Cooperstown. Anybody else been to Cooperstown? You've been, oh, great. We got hardcore here. Yeah, no, I've been there many times, and I've copied the entire Iowa file. If you need to do research, save the airfare, contact me, my cards are up here. I've got the entire Cooperstown, Iowa file in my home in Des Moines. And the Tim Wiles, who used to be the librarian there, he has Iowa connections, and we're good friends. He's not there anymore, but we're good friends. So, the third part of the myth is that the game of baseball was invented by Abner Doubleday in 1839 in Cooperstown, New York. That he called together boys from 2 schools in this little village called Cooperstown, and on the shore of Lake Otsego, which is across the street from the Hall of Fame, that he drew a diamond in the sand and then explained the rules that look something like the game that we know today. That's not, none of that's true, okay? So what is the truth? This is Doubleday. Doubleday's a great American, and you can see he attains the rank of Major General. He's at Fort Sumter in the beginning of the war in 1861. He's at Chancellorsville. He's at Gettysburg. He's highly decorated and deservedly so. He has a successful business career after the war, all right? And he plays an important role in American history. But no, he didn't play baseball. And I'll give you some hardcore facts to prove that before we're done here. A lot of you recognize this name too because the Sporting Good Company is founded by this man. He's from Illinois. He does deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. 253 wins. Al Spalding, in the late 1870s, early 1880s, gets into a 25-year debate, quote, argument with Henry Chadwick, who came here from England, immigrated from England. And the first time Chadwick ever saw a baseball game, He says to Spalding, you know what, there's nothing unique about that. That looks just like Rounders, a game we played in England long before you guys started playing baseball. And so they start arguing, and this goes on for years and years. Chadwick, like a lot of the Brits that come here, is going to lose his love of cricket and replace it with his love of baseball. And Chadwick is given credit, and deservedly so, for inventing the box score for baseball. And so a lot of people are going to contribute to the game of baseball as it evolves. No one person invented baseball. So anyway, he and Chadwick have this raging debate, and in the late 1890s, they decide to once and for all to settle the argument. Is it a uniquely American game? So they put together something called the Mills Commission. And Doubleday will put on the commission a good friend of his from Civil War days. And he'll be the head of the commission, and then they'll put on there the first president of the National League, they'll put on there the head of the Amateur Athletic Union, some former Major League players. Whatever conclusion they come up with, it'll be above questioning, it'll be above reproach. And they all knew the answer they had to come up with before they were asked to serve on the commission, that it's an American game, all right? So, this is published in 1911. I have a copy in my collection, I didn't bring it with me. You can see the author, Mr. Spalding. Look at the cover. How less American could it be, right? Uncle Sam wielding a baseball bat wrapped in a flag. This book is a marvelous source for research from chapter 2 on. Chapter 1 is a pack of lies. It's about Doubleday inventing the game of baseball, all right? And then you'll meet, there's the head of the commission. Civil War hero, again an important figure in American history, asked to head up this commission. It's called the Mills Commission Report. And now, here's the interesting part. An Iowan plays an important role in this raging debate. Meet Abner Graves. And let me tell you, when the commission was set up, they called in people to come in and testify that supposedly knew a lot about the game. The key testimony in this commission, 2 years of meetings, sporadic meetings and so on, was this man. He was born in 1833, just outside of Cooperstown, New York. And he swore in front of this commission that he was there that day when Doubleday called those boys to Lake Otsego and drew the diamond in the sand and invented baseball. He moves at an early age from New York, and he moves to Dow City, Iowa, not far from here, right off of the highway up this road here, close to Denison, Dowsville. He raises Angus cattle, and he's a successful banker. And I've got an autographed banknote from the Dow City Bank of this man right here. He swore he was there. After he testifies, he's already in his 80s when he testifies. He goes out to Denver, Colorado, and invests in mining and becomes even richer. But he goes crazy, takes out a revolver, shoots his wife through the head, and is institutionalized. That's how credible of a witness he was. Now here's the problem with the whole Doubleday story. First of all, he's born in 33. So how old was he when he supposedly saw that diamond in the sand and so on? He was 6. 6-year-olds don't have a very long memory, all right, except for, you know, sweet stuff. And what else is wrong with the Doubleday story? Doubleday is in the class of 1842 at West Point Military Academy. I'm a veteran. I've had friends that have gone to the academies. West Point, Annapolis, the Air Force Academy, they don't let you go home for the summer in 1839 to invent baseball. We have the attendance records from West Point. He was there all summer. He wasn't in Cooperstown inventing baseball. We have 67 diaries from the family of Doubleday. If I had invented baseball somewhere in Diary 23, Chapter 8 through, I would mention inventing baseball. Not a word about inventing baseball in his diaries. And then the last part is, when he dies in 1883, Doubleday, Mills is one of the pallbearers, and he gives part of the eulogy. And he says, you know what? Abner really didn't like outdoor sports anyway. He didn't invent baseball. So if he didn't invent it, where does this wonderful game come from? Lots of different sources. Take a look at the date. We're part of England. 1744. And watch in the next couple of images up here, all the different ways that it's referred to. Base-ball. The ball once struck off, away flies the boy to the next destined post. Stool ball, trap ball, post ball, 1-cat, 2-cat, 3-cat. All children's games involving swatting at something round with a branch or a broom handle, running someplace, running back, and maybe keeping tallies or scores. And you're going to meet a number of these kids' games. And I'll tell you, that I played when I was a kid. Look at the bat and ball, playing ball, base and ball. You've just seen 4 different ways referring to this thing. And I love this, the date there, 1820. That's the date of the Missouri Compromise. Missouri is allowed into the Union as a pro-slave state balanced by Maine, which is anti-slave and so on. But it's important because steamboat traffic is coming to Iowa. Iowa's not on the map, not as a territory, not as a state. But what I like about this picture, you can see these kids are wearing some kind of uniforms. They're probably a little bit richer kids. And it almost looks like a bat that we're familiar with. But you didn't have any standardized equipment for any of these things. There were no mitts, there were no masks, nothing like that. And you're going to meet someone here shortly. The official historian of Major League Baseball, his name is John Thorne. I've met John, okay? And about 5 years ago, John Thorne got a call from Jim Bouton. If you know baseball, you know the name Jim Bouton, pitcher for the Yankees. He wrote the book called Ball 4, all right? Bouton says to Thorne, what are you doing next weekend? And he said, well, I didn't have anything really important planned. He says, you do now. We're traveling to Springfield, Massachusetts. And he said, why? He said, we've got some important baseball history up there that we're not aware of. So they go up there. I said Springfield, Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And what they found is in the official documents of that community, a city ordinance was passed by the village elders banning the playing of baseball within 80 yards of any public building because the kids were breaking out too many windows. That's 4 years after the Constitution's drafted. 4 years after the Constitution's drafted. And so again, you can see in one more here, 1834, 2 years after the Black Hawk War is over, Iowa's open for settlement. I know where this is, I've been there, maybe some of you have. If you've ever been to the Boston Common, it's that beautiful park in the middle of Boston. A good friend of mine, who sadly is a Red Sox fan, he got married under a 250-year-old tree. And we went there, but the best part of the whole wedding was he had 35 tickets at Fenway Park for us. And so, wearing a Yankee hat going into Fenway Park, that's risky business. So, But they're in uniforms. These are wealthy kids, and they're playing ball. Now, what I want to share with you guys is, I did bring a small part of my baseball library, and I'm going to show you. David Block's book came out about 20 years ago. Lucy's taking notes, so. Baseball Before We Knew It, A Search for the Roots of the Game. Now, David and I have talked on the phone, I've never met him. But this is solid, good research. Going back to, before this country ever existed. In ancient Egypt, they were playing games. And there's inscriptions on some of the tombs and so on, where they're swatting at something and, who knows what it was called, and so on. But David wrote this book about 20 years ago. And then, about 15 years ago, John Thorne, who I just mentioned, Baseball in the Garden of Eden, The Secret History of the Early Game by John Thorne. This is relatively new. Something I've always taught my history students, all the years I taught, is that history is process. And there's nothing wrong when we have better research methods, we have better technology to change what we thought about something. It's not etched into stone. We didn't know about Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson until in the last 20 years. Had a bunch of kids with her, and she was a slave, all right? And that, but John is a solid, historian. And then John has a good friend that lives in New York. This came out about 6-7 years ago. Tom Gilbert, and the cover's like, it's like the National Enquirer, intended to get your attention. Outrageous lies exposed. How baseball happened. The true story revealed by Tom Gilbert. But what's great about this is the first tribute to this book is from John Thorne, the other book that I just shared with you. So we're constantly building on our knowledge of where this game comes from. And I've got one of these daily tear-off calendars at home. I've got more than one, I've got 3, but one's a baseball calendar. And this is a great quote, and I want to read it to you. The first historical reference to baseball is in the Bible, where in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "In the big inning." Got it? Yeah, there was a long pause there. I know, I did that too the first time I heard this. It's a wonderful quote. In the big inning. There you go. Anyway, now, one last one before. This is a relatively new book. Baseball's Creation Myth. Adam Ford, Abner Graves, and the Cooperstown Story. It just destroys the Mills Commission's conclusions. And it says, why do we need one inventor? A lot of people contribute to the evolution of the game, and let's be happy with that. Think about this. 3 years ago, they changed 3 important rules in Major League Baseball. The size of the bases, okay? A pitch count, all right? I go to, telling some people here early on, I go to a lot of Iowa Cubs games and sit there with friends. And you're always, you know, when a new rule comes in, it takes a little while to assess the impact. The pitch count, it's shortened an Iowa Cubs game that averaged 3 hours and 39 minutes to just over 3 hours, all right? And I think it's a great improvement. Same thing with the bases. Bases being bigger, more emphasis on stealing and speed, not just on home runs and strikeouts. I love it. That makes the game a lot more exciting. And so there's nothing wrong with, you know, constant change in the game of baseball. I don't like all the changes. That if a robot replaces an umpire, I'm not sure I'm going to keep going. They're doing it already on an experimental basis in the minor leagues. They're not doing it in the major leagues. They do it at the Iowa Cubs game. The umpire has an earpiece, but he's not the one that calls it. The machine calls it, and then the umpire hears it, and it can be challenged. And they show up on the big screen, you know, if it's challenged exactly where that pitch was. And so that's already happening with the Iowa Cubs. But they don't do it every game. So, this is what I love. And I want to tell you about my own experience as a kid. You can see the date, it was just last year. We made it up. You don't need 9 on a team or grown-ups or uniforms. It's like baseball, only better. And a family circus. My brothers and I on Saturday mornings grew up in the Beaverdale part of Des Moines, if you know Des Moines at all. 30th and Hickman, Monroe School. Saturday mornings after breakfast, we would disappear. And our mom wouldn't see us until the sun was going down. And we played a game called Worky Out. I don't know if any of you remember that, the name of that game. We got at least a couple nodding heads and so on. The way it was played is that you had 3 batters. And as long as those batters could keep batting each other around, they could stay at bat all day and nobody else got a chance to bat. But the way you worked your way up, it was right field, center field, left field, third, short, second, first. Or the easy way to get up, if a batter hit a fly and you caught it, you took his place. All right? How many fielders could you have? As many as kids showed up that day. And here I was reading about games that we were playing in the 1950s. Kids were playing similar games in the 1750s. Kids games. Kids games. And but that's why I had to stick this in when I saw this in the paper last year in my PowerPoint. Parents are messing up a lot of kids' sports. All right? And both my kids were athletes. They played soccer, they ran cross country, and so on. But it's pretty ugly. You try and get, you know, high school boys to be umpires, put up with the stuff some parents do at some of these games. It's hard. All right. This is from Harper's Weekly, a publication that featured a lot of images between 1859 and the 1890s of baseball. But I like this because it's juxtaposition of cricket up here and baseball down here. Now think about this yourself. If you just look at the images, 1 or 2 words, what's the difference in what you see at the top compared to the bottom? Anyone?
Well, it looks like above is a cricket game, and below...
Well, no, it is, but yeah, but no, more than just what's being done there. This is action. This is excitement. This is dirt flying. This is wimpy stuff, all right? They stay clean. I had friends that played cricket at Iowa State, and I went to a cricket match. But, you know, this is comparable to a catcher. It's called a wicket keeper. And they're using more of a paddle, and they have set positions like bases. So there are similarities. And cricket is older than baseball, and cricket is in Iowa before baseball ever gets here. We'll talk about that when we get to Iowa. But the difference is these Brits that come over here and contribute to the baseball, they fell in love with this and abandoned this. You're going to hear a couple more British names that played an important role in the switch to baseball. Cricket's still played all over the country, but it's primarily a Commonwealth, English Commonwealth country. Pakistan plays it, India plays it, and so on, and still England. There are leagues here in the States. And I had one other image here too. This is from, again, Harper's Weekly, and this is Hoboken, New Jersey. 1859. Cricket, baseball, at the same site. And that's probably what some of those Brits that came over here saw. And they said, I prefer this to this. Harper's Woodcuts, this hobby involves a lot of money for old stuff that contributes to the early game of baseball. I mean, some of you heard that a Mickey Mantle card for 52 sold for $12.6 million just a year or so ago. The Honus Wagner card routinely sells for $7 or $8 million. You can get a beat-up one with 100 creases that'll sell for $350,000. Most of my stuff I've traded for, or I've brokered some really good collections, and instead of taking a percentage, which is the normal type of thing, I take cards out of the collection. And I've been all these years able to build it up quite a bit. And but anyway, so a cricket match, Hoboken for the second time, and it'll come up again. These are the New York Knickerbockers. These are descendants of Dutch immigrants that founded New Amsterdam, now called New York. All right? This is Alexander Cartwright. These are businessmen in New York City that in the 1840s, 2 days a week, would leave work early, go down to the Hudson River, get into a boat, and go across to Hoboken, New Jersey to play baseball under what they are going to develop called the New York rules. Hoboken, where they played, and you've seen it now, 2 previous images, they're called the Elysian Fields. And that's from Greek mythology, and it's a reference to the Elysian Fields is where heroes went to die. And a lot of baseball figures are going to become big, heroes in the evolution of the game. In 1845, this man is in the Hall of Fame. He's given credit for inventing baseball. He didn't. Everyone in the Hall of Fame has a plaque in Cooperstown. You guys have seen the plaques down there. When these books came out with their research, everything on his plaque, except his birth date and death date, was wrong. All right? He contributes to baseball. He didn't invent baseball. This guy contributes to baseball. 2 other players on his team contribute to baseball. Now I want to tell you about one of the guys up here. It's called analytics or sabermetrics, and these are all the number crunchers in baseball. Everything you see, exit velocity now, every hit is measured and so on, every pitch is measured and so on, spin rate is measured and everything. Well, anyway, we knew then that over 80% of all batters in baseball to this day are right-handed. You rarely get a switch hitter like Mickey Mantle, okay, or Eddie Murray, but left-handers, they're desirable too. Makes it challenging for the pitchers. One of the guys up here knew the statistics. He said, you know what, the game that we've been playing under, we've got a first baseman, second baseman, third baseman, we have fielders out there. But since most people are right-handed, we need to plug that spot between second and third, and let's call it shortstop. This is Lucius Doc Adams smoking the cigar. Yeah, he's the doctor, okay? And he's the one that suggests shortstop. He didn't invent it, it just made sense. It made sense. He wasn't given credit for contributing anything until about the last 15 years. 2 other members of this team contributed to the changing rules. Now, by the 1840s, there are Philadelphia rules, there are New England rules, and there are the emerging New York rules. And you'll see a difference here in a minute. Porter's Spirit of the Times, a chronicle, the turf, field sports, literature, and the stage, baseball in America at Hoboken, New Jersey. At Hoboken, New Jersey. I have this in my collection, this publication. And the date, again, you can see it, 1857. But the reason I wanted this in my collection is this. How they play the game in New England. Baseball, 1857. First base, second base, third base, fourth base. Rectangular shape. The striker is right here. I went the wrong way. But first base, second base, third base, fourth. The striker, the thrower, or the feeder. The umpire is here, not behind the plate. This guy here gets to ask for a low pitch or a high pitch, and the pitcher has to do that. Totally different game than the game being played in New York. So when the guys in New York invented their version of baseball, they said, you know what we have to do? We have to go to New England, and we have to play a doubleheader, and let the players decide which set of rules they prefer. The New York rules will win out by the time Iowa is a territory and a state. The Philadelphia rules disappear, these rules disappear. These rules, what else did they include? No foul lines. If you catch the ball on a bounce, the batter's out. If the runner is off the base and a fielder picks up the ball, he can throw it at the runner, and if he hits him, it's called soaking or plugging, he's out. All right? Well, it sounds really goofy today, and that's why we don't play under these rules. The players knew that. How many fielders could you have under these rules? Up to 24. It sounds like our kids' game at Monroe School. How many kids showed up there? It really doesn't sound like very good rules, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. You all have seen this quote, and I'll get a quick drink here while you're reading it, and laughing. And that's, I've met Yogi. Yogi was wired differently than most of us. And thank God for that. There are entire books of Yogi-isms. When you come to the fork in the road, take it. Yogi went on and on. There's a museum to him in New Jersey. But he was born in St. Louis, on the same neighborhood that Joe Barrigiola was born in, and so on. And still holds a number of World Series records. I mean, the Yankees were so dominant for so long in the 50s and 60s that Yogi, is unmatched in so many categories. He may never be surpassed. And that, but anyway, one of the reasons I am a Yankee fan is that growing up as a kid, you picked a winner. And it was either the Dodgers or the Yankees in the 1950s. And I preferred the Yankees. And one of the prized things in my collection of memorabilia, I have a Yogi Berra model bat that I used to hit rocks with and everything else back in the 50s, and I saved it. And I smoothed it off a little bit. I didn't, I wanted his name on there. But I've collected over 20 signatures of the 1956 Yankees on that bat, including Mickey Mantle, Whitey Ford, Gil McDougall, 20 signatures. I never got Elston Howard, the first African-American to play with the Yankees and so on. And that was probably the biggest missing signature I don't have on there. But what does the election of 1860 have to do with baseball? Well, most of us, again, this is from Harper's, but most of us know about Abraham Lincoln as a rail splitter, as a wrestler, and so on. The national game, 3 outs and 1 run, Abraham Lincoln winning the ball. Read the quote by Lincoln. Gentlemen, if any of you should ever take a hand in another match at this game, remember you must have a good bat, strike a fair ball to make a clean score and a home run. Look at the size of Abe's bat compared to these guys. That's John Bell, John Breckinridge, and Stephen Douglas. Lincoln is the lowest winning percentage of any president in U.S. history. He wins with 39% of the vote. He's a plurality winner, not a majority winner, and 7 states didn't even have him on the ballot. He's America's only regional president. In 1864, his name doesn't appear on the ballot in 11 states because they have a president named Jefferson Davis, and they don't recognize Lincoln. So we're headed into troubled times called the Civil War, but he knew about the game before he was ever elected president. It was being played in Illinois. It was being played in Illinois. It was being played in Iowa, but much earlier in Illinois. Illinois became a state before 1820. Iowa not until the mid-1840s. Territory 38, 46 for a state, and so on. And the first Battle of Bull Run was a shocking surprise. The Union Army got routed on the second day. No one was guarding the White House. Confederates, they could have kidnapped him, and who knows how the war might have turned out. All right? One of the first things they did is they surrounded the White House with troops, and most of them were from New York, and they set up, after that losing battle, they arranged for a baseball game to be played behind the White House. So he and his son could watch a baseball game to, for a minute, forget about the war. And so thousands of federal employees were let go from their work to come to the White House and watch a baseball game. He knew about the game. Chromolithograph, big fancy word for a colored lithograph, okay? But what really, you can't read it very well, but Union prisoners at Salisbury, North Carolina. These are POWs playing baseball. Look at the underhand pitch. And they're Confederate guards for the first time being introduced to the game of baseball. Being introduced. This is how the game is going to spread. This is how it's going to spread. Not all prisoner of war camps were Andersonville in Georgia, which was just a death trap. George Eaton was the historian at Rock Island for years. And I've been program chair. It's called the Des Moines Civil War Roundtable. For 25 years, I've been lining up speakers. And George said that a lot of the Confederate prisoners at Rock Island, they didn't want to leave. They had better food, better conditions, all right? Now, they didn't have room on that island to play baseball games, all right? But the conditions are pretty good. There were bad prisons both north and south, far worse than the south, because they just didn't have the resources. Elmira in New York was terrible as well. But this is a baseball game being played and the knowledge of the game being spread. A couple more. The only known photograph, this isn't important up here, these are New York troops. That is the only known photograph of a baseball game being played during the Civil War. It's in Pulaski, Georgia, spreading the game of baseball. There was very little baseball played in the South before the Civil War. There were teams in New Orleans, and that makes some sense because of all the professional people, businessmen that came through the port of New Orleans. They had knowledge of the game. But think about this, there were very few cities of any size in the Confederacy. Richmond, the capital, had 16,000 people. There were a dozen cities in the north with more than 100,000 people. And what I'm getting at is the South didn't have a middle class. The South had 4.1 million slaves, you had plantation, and the dirt poor farmers, and that was about it. The North has an emerging middle class that has leisure time, and they play baseball. And it just logically makes sense. One more. These are Union soldiers heading home, maybe to Iowa. I've never learned who these troops were. I'm a veteran. You always have your unit picture taken when you go home, before you have reunions and so on. But the most important thing about this picture is what you see on the ground in the front, in the very middle. Baseball bats going home. They're taking baseball bats and the knowledge of the game back to wherever they're going, to Iowa or wherever. That's how the game spreads. I'll give you some numbers here in a minute. All right. Little backtrack to 1858. When I taught Iowa history, I always taught my students that the pattern of development in Iowa is from southeast to northwest along the river valleys. Almost every first in Iowa history is along the Mississippi River. So I was on the Board of Trustees for the State Historical Society for 15 years. And I did a lot of research on the second floor of the library there. So no one had done this. And so I started reading newspapers from those cities along the Mississippi River. And lo and behold, one day, it was my Alex Haley Roots moment. Like lightning struck me. I read about this club being organized, the Pastime Baseball Club, in Davenport on May 28th of 1858. All right? No one has found an earlier date of any club, organization, or game. That next day, the first baseball game played west of the Mississippi is played in Davenport, Iowa, by that club and another club they put together. All right? I put together a chronology of all the important early dates in Iowa baseball history. And I had some of these made professionally. I didn't, but the woman that ran the museum over in Iowa City did. She was kind enough to do this. And they're playing baseball. The girls are mentioned in the Council Bluffs Nonpareil playing baseball in 1867. Girls are playing baseball, all right? Black kids are playing baseball in 1867 in Keokuk. The first bridge is in Davenport. Well, anyway, I'm reading and I come across this first mention. There's little mention before the Civil War. There is in Dubuque, there is in Davenport, of baseball clubs being organized. During the Civil War, the priority is the war. So 75,000 Iowa kids went off to war. Very little mention during the war. But here's some important numbers. In 1865, the year the Civil War ends, there are 12 town teams in Iowa, including one in Des Moines called the Capital Cities. 12 town teams, most in the eastern part of the state. In 1866, the next year, there are over 36 town teams in Iowa. Over 36. And some of the river cities have 2 or 3 teams. In 1867, there are over 200 town teams in Iowa. From a dozen to 36 to 200 in 3 years. The priorities in your life when you came to Homestead in Iowa was a shelter for your family, a school and a church, and a baseball team. That's it. That was the order. Every little town in Iowa wanted a baseball team. And there's a wonderful description in the Fort Dodge Messenger from 1866 of a game played, in detail, of a game played between the team from Marshall County, Marshalltown, and a team from Fort Dodge, the Wakansis. And they go to a neutral site, they go to Boonesboro, today called Boone, and that's where they play the game. But it's a long description about how important that game was to both communities. And of course, it was the championship of the world. Every game was. And that this Harper's woodcut, it tells you a lot though. Oh yeah, there's no text there. But first of all, no glove. That helps us date this. No gloves in the outfield. That helps us date it. But what I love is this grand pavilion with the red, white, and blue bunting in the background. Baseball has exploded after the Civil War. The glove isn't invented until the 1870s at Harvard University. So that's how we can date a lot of these images. Another quote. Anyone know the year the Spitballs banned? 1920. But there were about 15 pitchers where they waived the ban and let them continue to use it until they retired from baseball. One of them is one of the 7 Iowans in the Hall of Fame. And I'm going to take a minute right now and introduce you guys to the Hall of Famers. You know 2 of them right here, okay? But here's the way to remember. First letter of the last name. ABCFFVW. ABCFFVW. And I'm going to just hold up a book for each of them. The A is Cap Anson of Marshalltown. All right? First one to get 3,000 hits in the Hall of Fame. Very negative side to him. We can bring up here in a little bit. That first player manager in baseball, okay? Cap Anson. The B, I just did a program there a month ago. Dave Bancroft of Sioux City. Little book just came out last year. His nickname was the Beauty. He was a great shortstop, played for the Giants. The C, you guys know, if you were up here, Fred Clark of Winterset. Fred Clark of Winterset, 23-year career beginning in the 1890s with Louisville. Louisville becomes the Pittsburgh Pirates. He's the manager of the first World Series. They lose 5-3, but he's the manager. They win the 1909 World Series, defeating the Tigers and Ty Cobb. Batted .400. First 5 at-bats as a major league player, 5 hits, no one's ever done it since. And most Iowans have never heard of him. And at ABC, the first F is the spitballer. Urban Red Favor of Cascade. A great pitcher, got into the majors late, he was 30 years old. And then just a terrific pitcher for about 12 years after that. Terrific pitcher. His father owned a hotel up in Cascade. There's a kid right now in the majors from Cascade. I've watched him play in Des Moines. And then so Colin Ree, R-E-A, playing. But, so Little Cascade. There are 9 cities in Iowa of a population of 1,500 or less that have produced 2 or more major leaguers. I just heard about the tragic death of a construction worker from Neola. Neola produced 2 major league players, both born the same year, both nicknamed Red. It's Lost Nation produced 2 major league players. Norway produced 3 major league players. Bancroft produced 2 major league players. Holstein produced 2 major league players. Colville produced 2 major league players. All right? You get the idea. So ABC, F, and most Iowans do know the other F. FFV, Rapid Robert. Okay? And sadly, his little museum closed a few years ago. But, again, he did it to sell autographs. and brought in a lot of great players, which was nice, but you didn't have a reason to go back a second time unless you wanted another player's autograph. There was no educational component built into that little museum. It's a city hall now for Van Meter. And it's sad, because I did programs there, but the room is half the size of this room, and it's sort of L-shaped, so when I did my program, I couldn't see half the people I was talking to. They were all baseball fans, though. FFV, here he is, from Orient Maxburg. They just missed that tornado. Dazzy Vance, great pitcher for the Dodgers. I think it was 7 years in a row he was a strikeout leader in the National League. had this amazing high kick, well above his head. All right, you see the pictures of him. I don't know why he didn't tip over a lot more. And but anyway, and the W, when I get into a room with a bunch of baseball nerds, you always have this fun with trivia games that, you know, I know trivia, you don't know. All right, in 2006, there were 19 African Americans inducted into the Hall of Fame that deserved to be there. There was one white guy that was inducted with them that never played Major League Baseball, all right? Why was he inducted? And he's from Algona, Iowa. He's from Algona, Iowa. J.L. Wilkinson. J.L. Wilkinson put together the Kansas City Monarchs. J.L. Wilkinson discovered Ernie Banks, Willie Mays, Satchel Paige. I can go on and on. He's a great marketer and promoter. The first one to use lights on his bus. They were mobile lights that he would haul with him because they couldn't play on the white players' fields. One of the best promoters, he was the only white manager in the Negro Leagues. Born in Algona in 1873. Those are your 7 Hall of Famers. Anson, Bancroft, Clark, Faber, Feller, Vance, and Wilkinson. There will be a quiz at the end of the hour. All right, getting back to Iowa's oldest known baseball card, 1867, the Washington Baseball Club, the first 9. A lot of these little towns had a first 9 and a second 9. Sometimes based on talent, sometimes based just on age, the old guys and the young guys. Sometimes based in the bigger cities on skills or trades, carpenters, you know, blacksmiths, whoever it might have been. When you get to the real big cities like New York, a lot of them were based on ethnic backgrounds, team all made up of Irish or Italians or whatever it might have been. 33 years old, the captain. Everybody else between 18 and 22. 2 of them Civil War veterans. There's a doctor, there's 2 farmers, there's a pharmacist in there. There's a guy that becomes a surgeon at the University of Iowa. 2 of them are buried in Washington, Iowa. We've done the research on this team. And I've got the box score from when this team played together for the first time. Found it in a newspaper, and so on. And again, as a historian, I'm always careful, oldest known. There may be someone that finds something older, but they haven't yet. And this is, I found this thing 25, 30 years ago. And that, but I don't think there are a lot of people out there trying to one-up me doing the research, all right? It took me a long time to do the research. If any of you want, I didn't bring more than just a few copies, but when I was on the board for this historical society, this publication doesn't come out anymore. It's called Iowa Heritage Illustrated, and Jenna Lee was the editor of this, and she heard my program and saw part of my collection and asked, John, would you consider writing a couple of articles for an upcoming edition? So 5 articles in there are written by me, and 3 are written by friends of mine. The whole thing is about baseball. And a lot of the information you're getting tonight, I only brought 3 copies, but I don't want to take them home with me, so if any of you want to pick them up, that you're welcome to. But so, yeah. Mount Pleasant, Iowa, 2012. I was told that a gentleman would be coming in before my program to show me a 3-ring binder. David came in, he's an attorney down there. He just died about 2 years ago. And he showed me 2 sets of cards, one from 1915. These are cards his dad put together, called M1014s, and 1 set from 1917, put together. They're from, they're produced in San Francisco. And anyway, the hobby had never seen a complete set of the ones produced in San Francisco. The M1014 has Babe Ruth rookie card pitching for Boston. Over about a 3-year period, I helped David sell those 2 sets for over $500,000. All right, and that one sold as a set, one sold as individual cards, whichever brought in more money. And I lucked out because the one that sold as individual cards had 3 Iowans in it, and now they're in my collection. And that Urban Faber's in there, David Bancroft's in there, and a catcher from Story City, Hank Severide's in there. And they're in beautiful condition. But what does that have to do with this? He had something else in a little satchel. And what you're looking at, he had the diary of this team. And look at the date. The oldest known piece of baseball memorabilia. And yes, I'm the proud owner of this. The bylaws, the Constitution, everything. Let's elect officers. Well, we don't have any equipment. What does it cost? What do we charge for membership? Where do we meet? How often do we meet? Who do we play? There are only 3 teams in a 50-mile radius. All right? All that's in here. And the amazing thing about this is the secretary's handwriting. This is a man's writing. They taught script in every country school. Look at grandma's handwriting, it's beautiful. And then look at dad's, it looks like Egyptian hieroglyphics, including mine, all right? But it's a wonderful piece of memorabilia. And it wouldn't be that important to a lot of people, but it obviously documents how this game got here to Iowa. And it, look how proud he is to play for Marshalltown. Marshalltown's, they have a team by 1866. And this should read 1867. And no, he did not play with Anson, okay? We've had to correct that. I belong to another organization, you're hearing a lot of organizations. The acronym is SABRE, and it stands for Society for American Baseball Research. There are about 7,000 of us nationwide, and we meet once a year in a major league venue. This year it's in Minneapolis and so on. And I've written quite a few articles for them, and I've done a lot of research for them. And part of it is to, find things that are wrong and correct them. But I love the image though. I mean, he is so proud to be on the starting team for Marshalltown. We'll go through these quickly. This is another, we thought this was the Luther College team. All the names are on the back, and they're all Norwegian. You weren't allowed to move into Decorah unless you were Norwegian. That's not true, but it's close. Well, around here it's Danish, isn't it? Yeah. Well, anyway, you can see different kind of uniforms. A lot of them don't match very well. Look at the different size of the bats. No standard bats for a lot of these town teams, whatever you could afford. There are catalogs by this time for the big leagues and so on, but not for town teams. And then look right here. We know this is post-1870 because the mask was invented in the late 1870s at Harvard. I went up to Decorah. My wife and I owned a country schoolhouse for years, for 31 years up there in Alawakee County, north of Waukon, if you know that part of the state. And downsizing, we sold it recently. It's a B&B now. But I went up to Luther College and went to the library, and she was trying to help me find some of these names because we thought it was a Luther team. And out of frustration, we went back to the very first yearbooks at Luther. It started in the 1850s, moved there from Wisconsin and so on. And we just looked at each other about an hour after we started doing this and said, we're in the wrong building. Went to the courthouse, started looking at plat records, tax records, and the names started popping. This was a town team, not a Luther College team. I love this broadside promoting a game between two South Central Iowa teams. You can see the date. The latter club is to be strengthened by 4 players of the famous Shane Hill Club. Ringers. That's how important these games were. Read on. Is to be the greatest game of the season that both clubs will play for blood. All right? They're not too subtle about it. No one should fail to see it. John Edler of Bonaparte, well known to the lovers of the game, will officiate as umpire, which is a surety of a fair and quiet game. Now wait a minute. Is it fair and quiet, or is it for blood? It's for blood. All right. Admission, 20 cents. Ladies, 10 cents. There are a lot of pictures of these early town teams where, unless the community had objections for religious reasons, and there were some, right from church in your Sunday best, you went to the bleachers to watch a baseball game. And I've got pictures of these ladies with big bonnets sitting up there with a bullhorn, screaming their lungs out for their town team. That's how important these things were. Iowa's first salaried player, Calvin McVeigh of Montrose, Iowa. Should read 1849. We've corrected that. Tell you, look, Montrose is 6 miles north of Keokuk on the Mississippi. If you go to Montrose, there's nothing there, but you can walk out on the pier and look at through binoculars at the Mormon temple in Nauvoo. All right? And there's a dying little fishing town. But about 25 years ago, I went there, having read about this guy, and I walked into the Casey's or Quick Trip or whatever it is that they have there. I've been back a number of times. And I said, who's the most knowledgeable person in Montrose on the history of your town? And about 3 people simultaneously blurt out Mary Sue Chatfield. So I said, well, I'd like to give her a call and see if we could visit. So I called, and she invited me over, and I said, have you ever heard of Calvin McVeigh? She said, no. Should I? Oh, yeah. And so now they have a community building. And in front of the community building, they have, made out of stone, a beautiful, engraved plaque, birthplace of Iowa's first professional baseball player, Montrose, Iowa, Calvin McVeigh. Calvin lived here the first 10 years of his life. His father, William, tried to homestead, good carpenter, not a very good farmer. I walked the grounds where their family plot had been, or where the acreage had been, okay? Out of frustration, they moved back to Indianapolis, where they had relatives. Calvin was an all-around good athlete. He wrestled, he boxed, you know. There's a description of him on the rapids by the Mississippi River doing flip-flaps. Well, what is a flip-flap? It's Ozzie Smith, after a great, play, he does the somersault. That's what Calvin was doing. Calvin's about my size. You can see again, 5'9", 170, somewhere in that range. They moved back to Indianapolis. He plays 1 year for the University Nine, 1866. He plays 1 year for a town team called the Westerns, 1867. He plays 1 year for the Actives, another town team, 1868. And in 1869, after getting beat by these teams from the New England area by lopsided scores of like 104-5, Aaron Champion, a businessman, says, we're going to put together an all-salary team. We're going to practice, drill. We're going to get spiffy uniforms, and we're going to change the game of baseball. The first two people he hired was George Wright, an immigrant from England, and Harry Wright, his brother. Harry becomes the team manager player. George is the best player in baseball. George is offered a salary of $1,400 to play that first year for Cincinnati. The last guy added to the team is Calvin McVeigh of Iowa to play right field. Isn't that where we always stick the kid that's kind of questionable in terms of talent? Any of you remember that song by Peter Palmieri? Peter Yarrow has a song called Playing Right Field. It's funny. This kid dreads being picked for the team. He is. They put him in right field. And then the song goes on about he's watching dandelions grow and cloud formations and everything. And all of a sudden, the crowd roars, and he can't figure out why. And he sticks his glove out and the ball falls in. It's a funny, funny song. But it makes a point. I mean, as kids, that was, you pick those teams all the time. There's an ad now where that little girl picks a basketball team and picks Barkley. A lot of you have seen that. I crack up every time I see that. Barkley says, yeah, one of those. So anyway, so he's in right field for this team, and this is the team, and this is Calvin right here. That's the pitcher, Asa Brainerd, okay? These are the rights right here, okay? They played 5 exhibition games in the Cincinnati area, won them all by lopsided scores, and then they knew what they had to do. Head east and play those teams. They came to Cincinnati and drubbed us. Their record will be 21-0 when they come back from the tour in the West. The game of baseball will never be the same. Never. Only one close game against the Troy Haymakers. All the others were lopsided. When they came back, Aaron Champion, the guy that helped create the team, threw a massive banquet described in detail. And, well, this is McVeigh. I'll get to what else he did in a minute. But this is one of the first programs depicting a professional team. Each of the players is featured in a cameo like this. Highly prized, both block letters and script, the name. I don't own one of these, and I'd love to own one, but I have a number of pieces of Calvin McVeigh in my collection. When they won those first 21 games, this is 27 feet long, this bat, and weighs 1,600 pounds. That was the reward for being the best team in baseball. And you can't see it very well, but the starting nine's names are all carved on the bat. Starting with George Wright at the top, Harry Wright and then George. That's McVeigh, Calvin McVeigh from Montrose, and I do have that card up here. This is taken by the Warren Studios in Boston. 2 years in Cincinnati, 57-0 record the first year. They win the first 20 games the second year. They're finally beaten in Brooklyn by the Brooklyn Atlantics, 8-7 in a game. But the game's totally different by that time. A lot of people are putting together professional teams because of what these guys did. You always had pictures taken, one in uniform, one in civilian dress. What makes my card in my collection so valuable is this. Only 2 known autographs, ever, of Calvin McVeigh. And one of them sitting right here. And then you can see Boston, Massachusetts, where they took the pictures. McVeigh, later on, will come back. He's older. 2 years with Cincinnati, 2 years in Boston, 1 year with Baltimore. He's 23 years old, the youngest player manager ever. Bats over 400, played every position including pitched. Most Iowans have never heard of him. All right? They're the first team in 1869 to travel on the Transcontinental Railroad. any kind of team. The Golden Spike was driven on May 10th of '69. When they won those 21 games, and after the banquet, they went out to San Francisco and beat a bunch of teams out there. And came back. Calvin McVeigh fell in love with San Francisco, and when he leaves baseball eventually, he'll go back to San Francisco, play a little bit, manage a little bit, and he'll die out there. He's cremated, so on. That's Yogi Berra's buddy, Joe Garagiola. The hardest position in baseball to play, by far. And it's not even close. When you get, in a major league ballpark, especially when they used to have that artificial turf, it'd be 130 degrees down there. And they've got all that equipment on. And they're out there framing every strike. They know every batter. They know every pitcher. They know what they can throw and can't throw. They work as a team. But he doesn't get a break, except, in between when the other team's batting. Take all that stuff off and then put it right back on. The Marshall Baseball Club, I'll run through these kind of quickly. Henry Anson, the founder of Marshalltown, the father. Cap Anson, the Hall of Famer. Sturgis Anson, his younger brother. A little bit of time at Iowa City University, a little bit of time at Notre Dame. They weren't very good academically. And the only one that was a real talent baseball-wise, they were a good team. This is called stacked arms. It's a military thing. The angle has to be just right, and the ball has to be set just right, where the whole thing collapses. And I think it's kind of a nice metaphor for what a good team's all about. You've got to practice, 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 and work as a team and so on. Cap Anson, I have autographs of 6 of the 7 Iowa Hall of Famers. And that an early tobacco card of Cap Anson from the 1870s. You see his first base, Mayo cut plug, chewing tobacco. One more of Cap Anson. This should read 1899. On the back, you've got a bio with a filigree border all the way around it. Beautiful things. These are 8.5 by 11, and it's sitting up here in the case. This set, you can see the date. There are 50 cards in the set, including boxers, wrestlers, Annie Oakley, Buffalo Bill Cody, pool players, but they're 10 baseball players, and they're 95% of the value of the set, and the 10 baseball players are sitting up here. And I haven't used the word yet today, but some of these early baseball cards are aesthetically beautiful. And, again, these are painted, thick stock cardboard. The 2 biggest enemies of baseball cards, the sun and moisture. These things will last forever if you take care of them. I've got the complete set sitting up here if you want to come up and take a look. We're getting near the end. That is the set, and here's Anson right here. 6 of these guys are in the Hall of Fame. 6 of them. Fred Clark, that same set. This is what you can see at the bottom, Louisville. Quote his rookie picture. All right? You can see the date, 99 at the top. Fred Clark, it's called a Turkey Red, and it is sitting right here. It's about a little bit smaller than 8.5 by 11. On the reverse side, you've got, in addition to baseball players, there are boxers and wrestlers and things like that in that set as well. Billy Sunday, known better as an evangelical preacher in the 1920s, but Billy was a great town team talent playing for Ames. And Anson came back to Marshalltown to visit relatives once he was with Chicago. And he was told, you've got to see this kid, he's got blazing speed. He went over and watched a game and recruited him to come to Chicago and gave him a contract. He'll play with Chicago, he'll play with Pittsburgh, and he'll play with the Philadelphia Athletics. Not a very good batter, not a very long career. By the 1920s, he and Amy Semple McPherson are 2 of the best known preachers in America. And totally different styles and everything. And again, you'll see a couple more. That's a tobacco card called an Old Judge. I've got a bunch of those. There are Des Moines players in the Old Judge series, and there are Sioux City players. There are over 7,000 cards in the set. I only collect the Des Moines, or if you're born in Iowa, and the Sioux City cards. And this is Billy with Chicago, and then Billy preaching. When he would get, Amy would have this entourage and flowers all over the stage. She'd fill a stadium and, preach up there. Billy would come out carrying a brown table and a Bible and put it on there. He'd be all over the stage. And he never forgot his love of baseball in his preaching. Stuff like, throw Satan out at home. That kind of stuff came out of his mouth all the time. I collect a lot of early Iowa baseball. And you can see the year here. champions for 1906 since the team put together in 1905. Des Moines Club, and I love this, and I do have it up here in the, no, I guess this one I didn't bring with me today, but this is the Prohibitionists. The first team in Des Moines was put together in 1887, and they were the Hawkeyes. Prohibitionists are one of the teams that soon follow. A lot of these guys are in those old Judge cars that I just showed you. But what I really like about this is one of the first images of Athletic Park, the first ballpark in Des Moines. If you know where the Iowa Cubs ballpark is located, where the Raccoon and Des Moines River come together, just go 2 blocks up the Raccoon River to Southeast 7th. That's where this ballpark was located. And you can see it's a big ballpark. So Des Moines has taken baseball to heart. Some old Judge baseball cards of Des Moines players. Des Moines spelled a couple different ways. What's neat about these cards, if you get one with a crisp image on it, these are all studio shot. You'll see the string holding the ball. Some of the players have 7 poses. No one's ever completed a set of these. No one. Every time they think they have, new ones show up. Sioux City players. I took a whole bunch of my Sioux City stuff up there when I was up there a couple weeks ago. I talked about the aesthetics. These are Rose & Company postcards. Stunning thing. George Stone from Lost Nation, Iowa, batted .364. He batted better than Hannes Wagner that year. He was Rookie of the Year. And unless you live in Lost Nation, Iowa, most, again, Iowans have never heard of them. But they're gorgeous postcards. My favorite player, Wheaties, box, side of a box. Classic Lou Gehrig pose. Died too young, tragically, and so on. Combined his love of learning with his love of sports. It's been pretty much my life too. And that my other favorite player, tragic figures. Whoop, there he is. Again, got 3,000 hits and then dies in a plane crash taking supplies to the victims of an earthquake in Nicaragua. That's his rookie card from 1955. I can make the argument, and a lot of people would agree with me, that if he had lived longer, best all-around player to ever have played the game. Absolute cannon for an arm, great hitter, great speed, combined everything, and a wonderful humanitarian. I used to own that card. Picked it up at a small show at Adventureland. Kid had a stack of them from that year in 101 Forest from 1915. And he's a skinny pitcher for Boston. And about 9 years ago, on the 100th anniversary of Babe Ruth breaking in, as a historian, I knew what would happen to the value of the card. It would go like that, and it did. I paid $1,000 for it when I bought it 30 years ago. I sold it to help my kids through college, all right? And it's paid off in many ways, but I sold it for $90,000. Yeah. I did pose in my uniform, holding my autographed Babe Ruth ball, which I still have, holding that card in the other hand, and my wife took a bunch of pictures, okay? And I had reinvested some of that money in a Lou Gehrig card from 1933 called the Gaudi, graded PSA 8, okay? And I sold that to help again. Now my 5 grandkids have some money for college and so on, and the Lou Gehrig card sold for almost $100,000. We're done in a minute here, but I love this quote to finish up my PowerPoint. That Johnny Vanderveer, 2 back-to-back no-hitters. If we get a pitcher to go through 6 innings this day and age, we're lucky. All right, a complete game is almost unheard of anymore. And that's not being critical of pitchers, but that's, you know, they're paying all these early relief, middle relief, late relief, closers, you know, big bucks to throw 6 pitches. Emil Levson of Wyoming, Iowa, played for Cleveland in the 1930s. He pitched a no-hitter, okay? Didn't strike anybody out, but a no-hitter. There's a half-hour break. He goes up to the manager and says, "I feel great. Can I start the second game?" The manager says, "Are you sure?" He says, "Well, yeah, we'll help out all the other pitchers." He pitches a second no-hitter. No one's ever done that again. Emil Levson of Wyoming, Iowa. It's the only thing he ever did to be remembered by, and most people don't remember that. And there it is. That's the uniform. Her name was Bertha Bertram. She was a seamstress in 1868. My seamstress was a woman from Centerville, Iowa, that had never done anything except Victorian dresses. So I did this long pause. "Are you sure you can do a baseball uniform?" And she said, well, I'm gonna have to measure you. So she came up to Des Moines, took the measurements. I told her the material, cricket flannel. I told her exactly the description. You can't see the red socks, the red stockings, and so on. And it's a perfect fit. And when it's not hot, I do wear it for presentations. And this was on display at the old Capitol in Iowa City, and they asked me to just pose. And Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Mickey Mantle. Right? And that was just happenstance that I leaned there. Bob Feller in the background. Thank you all. Questions?
Yeah, like Lou Gehrig now, how much do you have to give for that card? Yeah.
Well, no, that one, it was a PSA, he knows what that means. The PSA stands, there are 4 professional grading services. PSA is Professional Sports Authenticators. And any card graded 8, 9, or 10 is megabucks. And a Lou Gehrig card, I paid $12,000 for it and sold it for $100,000.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
But again, it's not about the big money. It's about educating yourself, being honest with people when you broker their collections, educating them, letting them track the auctions, and it always pays back. Treat people decently, and it always pays back. And I've been in the hobby a long time, and I've never had anyone complain. I let them follow every auction. I tell them about their cards. I said, go to these auctions, see what cards in similar condition are selling for, and if they're comfortable with me arranging for them to go to an auctioneer, nationwide auction, then, we do that. And their whole families track the auctions. And, I've got some cards I just sold, and my son's 47, my daughter's 43, and they track the auctions up until 2 in the morning. So,
Now, eventually I'm going to take the time and do a little bit of sightseeing and Danforth, even though I was a citizen and retired. Can I find anything about history of baseball from way back then?
Yeah, O'Donnell Stadium's right on the river there by the bridge across this in Davenport.
Okay.
And they've got a couple of museums in there
Okay.
that have quite a bit about baseball. But I would just contact the Chamber of Commerce and say, if I want to find out a little bit more about the history.
Right.
There's a book written about Davenport baseball. I didn't bring mine with me, but I do have it.
Okay.
And so it's not hard to get information. A lot of these towns, Davenport's had teams back to the early 1900s.
Okay.
And I'll share this last story with you. When Jeff Lance used to work at the Iowa Cubs, and I've been going down there since the 1950s as a paper boy. They had a free day for paper carriers. And I know Michael Gardner, who sold the team a couple years ago, fairly well. And Jeff worked with them. They had something in the winter called Fan Fest, and they would bring in well-known major league players for autographs and stuff. And Jeff left the Iowa Cubs to work with the Baltimore Orioles, and he eventually became the communications director for all minor league baseball, and now he's the communications director for all of Major League Baseball. He's a born in Iowa City kid. And he called me 2 years ago. We were down at Honey Creek Resort with a family get-together, and he said, John, I need some baseball research. I said, how can I help? I need research on the Cedar Rapids Bunnies and the Davenport Blue Stockings and their game in 1910. And I said, well, yeah, I think I could probably help you out with that, because I had files on both those teams. And so I had, a week to write the article? And anyway, Jeff said I wanted it as an insert for the program at the Field of Dreams game. And I got it to him, minor editing. I gave him a couple pictures to include. And it wasn't an insert. It was the first article in the program at the Field of Dreams game. And they gave me 2 tickets in the press box overlooking home plate. All right? So a little bit of research in baseball can go a long way. You know those 2 tickets would have cost me? I wouldn't have been up in the press box, but behind home plate, probably $5,000 each. So no, I've had fun with it, and I continue to have fun with it. And I've done a bunch of programs this spring all over the state already. I did one in Adair just a few weeks ago, and I did we had a conference up in Dubuque, a baseball conference. We were up there. I did the Sioux City one I mentioned. I've been down to Tabor, to Malvern, Red Oak, Shenandoah, Clarinda. I'm just making this part of the state, Council Bluffs. I've done them in Lamar's, I've done them in Spencer. It's a lot of fun. And what I do, Toledo, Iowa was not aware 2 years ago that the best pitcher in baseball, born in Toledo, was Rookie of the Year in the major leagues in 1910, had the highest winning percentage of any Cubs pitcher. His name is Leonard Cole. And I had written an article for that organization, Sabre, that I mentioned. And they reached out to me and basically said, some guy found out that he was born there. And I said, well, yeah, he was one of the best pitchers for 2 years in a row. And because of that, they had a Leonard Cole Day They renamed the ballpark after Leonard Cole. They have a drinking fountain with a plaque on it with Leonard Cole. They now know he's buried there in the cemetery. And before all that happened, hardly anyone in town had any idea that he was from there. And that little towns that are struggling have to give people reasons to want to come to that town. And, you know, and there are a lot of baseball nerds that will go almost anywhere to track down information about a ball player. And I found that out in all these travels when I go around the state. It's fun, you know. Neola, Iowa, 2 guys nicknamed Red, born in 1883. And that, I mean, one ended up in jail. Anybody else, questions? Come on up if you like, take a quick look, and we'll wind it up here pretty quick.
Oh, that Dan Meter, that pop fella, he's a well-known pitcher for the Cleveland Indians.
Oh, yeah.
What did they do with his memorabilia?
Oh, he went back to his wife Ann and back to Cleveland.
Okay.
He's got grown kids too, adult kids. Yeah.
All right, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you John Liepa, and thank you once again to Humanities Iowa and the State Historical Society for putting on this program. Please feel free to ask them questions and go look at the memorabilia. And don't forget to please sign in on the sign-in sheet over there on the counter. Thank you.
Thank you.